Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation. Pastor Don Lawrence of Christ Church.
Thank you, Mayor. Heavenly Father, as we enjoy this joyous season of the year, we praise you for your presence. We praise you for family gatherings and friends getting together to celebrate. We praise and thank you for your blessing in our lives. We ask that you would help us to remember the lonely, the less fortunate, those who are struggling. We pray for our military personnel who are separated from their loved ones during this Christmas season. And this evening, Lord, we specifically ask that you would bless and lead our council members as they address topics of concern to our community. We thank you for their service. We ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Don. Roll call, please, Beth.
Mayor Kavanaugh?
Here.
Councilmember Dickey?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Yates?
Present.
Vice Mayor Henson?
Here.
Councilmember Elke?
Here.
Councilmember Lachey?
I want to take this opportunity in my mayor's report to thank all the residents of our wonderful town who have given so generously through this holiday season. Starting with Thanksgiving through Hanukkah and now Christmas, you have outdone yourselves with your kindness to give to the less fortunate. From the Rotary bell ringers for the Salvation Army, to the banks with their angels on the trees, to the American Legion, packages from home, to the VFW and Caldwell Banker for Toys for Tots, to the Elks shopping spree for needy kids, to cruising cars in the grocery stores for helping Extended Hands Food Bank, to the Hooks and Needles Community Center Group for their handmade blankets that went everywhere in the valley and beyond, to all the faith-based groups who held collections for the needy, to all the residents who gave so generously to these groups, and in so many other ways to make the holiday season just a little brighter for our neighbors. And a thank you to the town of Fountain Hills for our volunteer coordinator, Heather, who gathered and gave information to the many people of our town who called looking for help. It is truly a season of giving in the town of Fountain Hills. On behalf of the Town Council, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a very prosperous and happy New Year. Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any call to the public?
No, Mayor.
Okay. We have 4 items on the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to accept as listed, please?
Mayor, so moved.
And a roll call, please, vote.
Councilmember Dickey? Aye. Councilmember Elke?
Aye.
Councilmember Lachey?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Henson? Aye. Councilmember Yates?
Aye.
Councilmember Brown?
Aye.
And Mayor Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Mayor, 7-0.
We'll start with our regular agenda items. Number 5 is presentation and discussion of the tourism program for the remainder of the fiscal year. Ken?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, again, as we promised, we would have an assessment to date regarding what we found of the current tourism program that was forwarded back to us from the Visitors Bureau from the Chamber of Commerce. Brian Hughes is here to give you a brief update and benefit, and then open up for discussion on future endeavors on what we want to do with the tourism programs.
Okay, Mayor Kavanaugh, council members, good evening. A lot of this is outlined in a memo that we gave you a preliminary memo about a month ago and then kind of reassessed it just last week. So where do we start? Balance of funding. As you know, in the town budget, we started with $103,000 that was contracted to the Chamber Visitors Bureau. And of that, we anticipate to have about $59,500 left at the end of this calendar year that will be unspent from their activities. We also anticipate getting another $5,000 in the budget from Fort McDowell that'll be transferred to us from the chamber. So a balance of $64,500 is about where we think we'll be at. As far as organization and how we kind of plan to take over tourism now that it's coming back to the town, our first thought is that it'll be with community services staff. A lot of the things that we do are related to events and marketing, so it kind of is a natural place there. We'll also do a little bit probably with some advertising and marketing contracts, and then we'll also be looking for interns from ASU's tourism program to kind of come in and collect information, help us distribute it, and find out what areas where we maybe need to look into doing some different marketing and things like that. So the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitors Bureau currently has an intern on their staff that they've been using. We're hoping to get her. She needs a full-time internship to complete her college coursework this spring, and so the fact that she's already been doing some of the work and knows the social media, the website a little bit, and some other things, she'll probably bring a lot of knowledge with her that will help us in this transition time. The funding, as Ken and I have discussed recently, will continue to come from the Economic Development Fund. Partnerships. Two of the most important partnerships are here, Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation and their Destination Fort McDowell marketing program. We have, Ken and the mayor have met with President Balderas and a few other folks from over there, and I think we're kind of reestablishing that relationship and kind of deciding where we want to go with it in the future. And so the dialogue's been opened up, and I think they're going to be a good partner again, and we probably can do a lot more with them in the next 6 months and beyond. And then the other partner is obviously the Office of Tourism. We were able to go down and meet with Sherry Henry, the director, and Mark Stanton, the deputy director, a couple weeks ago. Talked a little bit about the destination marketing organization that DMO, as it is, was kind of dissolved when the chamber kind of turned over the contract back to us. We think we can reestablish that relatively easily without going through some of the criteria that are in there that you have to wait a year and things like that. We can kind of petition the committee that oversees that 302 funding. And so we're looking into that and how we might be able to partner with some folks to meet their criteria. Visitor's Guide, this is one that's actually fairly easy to keep moving forward. It's no cost to the town. It's 100% ad supported. We get 40,000 copies annually. I'm expecting to get the final proof for the 2014 copy. Actually expected it today, but maybe tomorrow. And they're ready to go to print, and then that's distributed through visitors bureaus in centers around the state of Arizona, as well as some outside of Arizona, and then through Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. So we've got a pretty good distribution network in place, and we're going to keep those contracts going. Dining Guide, this is one that is probably the most difficult to keep up to date. A lot of things change in town, as we all know. But I think it's a valuable resource to have both digitally and then hard copies certain times of the year, definitely around some of our major events. It's nice to have out at an information table or an information booth, and even maybe a few hard copies here at Town Hall or at the Chamber. We're hoping that our intern could kind of keep this up to date and print as needed, but we also anticipate putting like a PDF or a flippable version on the websites, both the towns, the Experience Fountain Hills, and hopefully even working with Fort McDowell to get it on their Destination Fort McDowell website. Talking about the website, experiencefountainhills.org, the domains and ownership of all the different domain names, which there's a couple other ones other than Experience Fountain Hills. There's Visit Fountain Hills and a few others. But we now own those. They were transferred over from the Chamber. We also have passwords and access to the Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn social media accounts. So we can start posting or begin posting on those at any time. What we found with the experiencefountainhills.org website is that there's a really good framework in place. There's not too much we really need to do, but it still needs a lot of content. And as with any website, they need to be fluent, so people keep coming back to them and looking at the different content, the different events, things like that. We've already identified a lot of different content that needs to be updated, whether that's in meeting spaces or events, things like that. So we think we can get the ball rolling pretty quick on that. Visitor Center at the Fountain Hills Chamber of Commerce, a lot of people have asked about that. According to Frank Ferrara, it'll remain a function of the chamber. They have a very good staff of volunteers that looks forward to greeting people and passing out all the different items that are there. And so for the time being, that'll stay there, and that's their thing, and they want to keep doing it. And we will kind of evaluate down the road if we want to do some other visitor centers, whether it's something down near the park, here in this building, things like that. It's more of a long-term solution. Another question we've gotten is Visitors Bureau Advisory Committee. That advisory committee was a function of the Fountain Hills, Fort McDowell Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce. When that was dissolved, it was dissolved with the agreement when the agreement with the town was terminated. And moving forward, we're going to kind of place an emphasis on input from our funding partners moving forward, whether that's Fort McDowell or some other organizations. Budget estimates, this is very rough. We know a few things are pretty accurate as far as Infusionsoft, Infox, Alliance Airport Marketing. Those are things that are really easy to calculate. They're based on monthly fees. Some of the other things that we are going to probably be discovering as we move forward over the next 6 months is what print media campaigns have been going on. I know just last week I found Arizona Key magazine, which is a travel magazine, and saw an ad in there that I kind of forgot about, or we hadn't really had a bill or anything from the chamber to remind us that that's out there. So we need to look into that and find out what the terms are on that, and if that's something we want to continue. We want to look into possibly doing some more surveys and evaluations to determine at some of our major special events where people are coming from and how we might be able to use that information to do a little bit more target marketing. Whether we do that with the Mayor's Youth Council, kind of doing some evaluations out on the street or surveys out on the street to get zip codes and email addresses for future media campaigns that we might be doing. Lastly, the last item on there is the intern, and again, looking to get a paid intern at least during the spring semester, and I think she needs 40 hours a week again, so that would give us a lot of time for her to do some research for us, and as well as do a lot of things that we need to be done, and we think we can hit the ground running with, again, the website, social media, a lot of that stuff's already in place. We just need to start adding content. So that is kind of where we're at right now. Be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, I just have a comment and then a question. I also met with the Phoenix Convention and Visitors Bureau, who wanted us to partner with them. But after the meeting today with Fort McDowell, I found out that they partner with them. So even if we don't partner directly, we still get the same benefit partnering with the Fort.
Sure.
So that'll be good for us. But I had a question about the IDS technology marketing.
Mm-hmm.
The website is complete and it belongs to us. Can't we do that in-house? Why do we need that IDS?
Mayor Kavanaugh, to answer your question, there's some things we can do in-house. It's a WordPress design. There's definitely some areas that are very easy to update, but in looking at it a little bit further, there's some stuff in there that's hard-coded, and we may need somebody's expertise who does websites for a living, and since they actually built it, it probably makes sense just to go back. It might be less than that. We just kind of wanted to earmark a little bit of money, but it's something they do every day where we don't. So content's one thing, drop downs and things like that is another.
That's not for the marketing part, that's just for upkeep of the
Correct.
website?
Right.
Okay.
Just a little bit of maintenance that we can't do.
Okay, just the maintenance part. I
Right.
saw marketing, so I thought they were going to be doing some sort of
That,
marketing.
no, again, they built it, and that's their thing. And again, I'd rather just go right back to the person who built it to get some maintenance done.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone have any questions on this side? Kathy? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Well, first off, Brian, I think you've done a great job with the abruptness that this came about.
Thank you.
And I think you've got a really good plan. I'm very confident because you've been on the Tourism Bureau for a long while, and you were a major part of that. You kind of answered one of my questions was about the old bureau and the people that served on it. I know there's still a lot of interest with some of those individuals that have a lot of enthusiasm and would like to be at least a part or, to help or whatever. So maybe down the road, coming up with a way to kind of make that happen and let them be partners as well.
Sure. Mayor Kavanaugh, Vice Mayor Hanson, a lot of those people who were in that room over the years are directly involved with events and things that impact the tourism. So we would be talking with them on a regular basis, maybe not meeting as often, though.
Yeah, just to add a footnote to that, we're already hearing from the hotels, who, as you know, from the beginning used to be a big part of the Visitors Bureau, and now they heard that we're taking it over, and so they're coming back to offer their help and assistance to get our new program going. Anyone? Councilwoman Dickey?
Thank you, Mayor. Kind of going after what Cassie just said, that we have had people request avenues to be involved. So since it's a little bit complicated because we have probably an economic development person at least coming on part-time, but we did define that last time a little bit more on the business end. But economic development, the plan does have tourism in there. And then we've got the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission. What would be your preference of a point of contact for somebody who did want to directly be involved with the tourism visitors aspect of this?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Dickey, I think the point of contact would probably be with me and the Community Services Department. And then as needed, and again with Ken's direction, involve economic development when necessary and things like that. So.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else on this side?
Okay.
I've got kind of a laundry list.
Yeah, there's a short. Mayor, if I may.
Okay, go ahead,
Okay,
Councilman
great.
Leger.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Brian, just a quick question and then a couple comments. I've had an opportunity on several occasions to look at our website, experiencefountainhills.org, and when we started talking about that originally in our contracting with the Chamber, I think that it has pretty much met the scope and focus of what we as a council agreed on and budgeted for this fiscal year. So I'm glad to see that we're going to take that to the next step. And I think it's done a really nice job in terms of what the intent was, which is to give you a visual feeling of Fountain Hills in terms of what our events are, what our amenities are, what our assets are. So I'm hopeful that we can find an avenue to market that a bit more, because it really does a pretty nice job. But there's certainly significant room for improvement, and I think you've identified several of those areas. With respect to the website, is there a direct link to our website currently? I haven't seen a link on our website going to it, and I know it's a unique platform, and we can't integrate it into our platform, but food for thought, if we could link from our website, which is heavily trafficked, to that website, I think that would be a positive thing to do. And I just wanted to also kind of mirror some of the comments I heard from the DS this evening, which is I think Ken and Mark and Brian and whoever's been involved in this has done a really tremendous job taking a hot potato, hitting the ground running. What you just presented to us in terms of keeping it moving very much mirrors what we asked during this fiscal year in terms of focus and scope. So great work to y'all, and I expect that as you move through it, your memo is great, and I really like what you're doing to it in terms of the updates, and I'm hoping that as you guys move forward, you can communicate to us in that format. Thank you, Mayor.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank
Brian.
Okay, Councilman Elke.
Thank you. Brian, I think the first two should be directed to Andrew, just probably legal questions. Andrew, what would be the criteria that we have to establish as to who the town markets or allows to be on the social media, the websites, those sorts of things, to make sure that we're not gifting to some and not others? I mean, do we have to be mindful of that, and what's the criteria that we're looking at with respect to that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Elke, it's a good question, because most of the cities that we represent have that exact question on what limitations in social media are we under. We have some policies that we've adopted in other municipalities that have a full-blown in-house staff that does all of this work. We'll be happy to implement those. They're usually pretty tight. And unfortunately, the local community sometimes doesn't like how tight they are, but we restrict them to the government use. And that really is a narrow focus in most of the things that we do. And that's really been the issue with the dual websites. We're trying to figure out the best way to handle having the ability to use the non-town website in a manner that doesn't have those same restrictions. And we're not quite there yet on what those specific criteria will be, but it is something that's in the works.
Yeah, because I think we've talked about it before about what Payson does up there, and they've got a kind of a good example, so we could probably mirror some of the things that they do. And, you know, just for folks that may not understand the question I was asking, I mean, when we contracted with the chamber made those decisions, so it was a different entity that was making it. Now that we as staff are doing that, we have to be very mindful of that to make sure, especially a situation where somebody says, I want you to advertise for this event, and you say, well, that doesn't sound like it's a town event, and then you're doing it for this person and not that can run afoul. As far as the contracts that we have, do we have new contracts, or did we assume the chamber contracts with these providers?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Realke, to the extent that we could get a new contract in place, we've done that. There were a few where it was difficult for us to just assume the contract, so we've tried to put in place as best as we can a Band-Aid approach until we get to the end of the term, and then we can negotiate something different or go through whatever procurement process. But for the most part, we've been able to get something that we're comfortable will last until the end without too much trouble.
And Brian, was this, Mayor, if I could?
Sure.
Thank you.
For your list.
Thank you. Brian, the internship that's set up, was that something that was coordinated with the chamber in advance, and we just brought that intern on, or how was that?
Correct. They've had an intern. The plan was originally for her to continue through the spring semester. Again, she needs an internship, so we thought as long as we're taking on the tourism program, we could also take her on. And we've had interns in the past, as you may recall, in Parks and Recreation. So we're just kind of using that same format and just pulling her in and doing that and just calling it a tourism versus recreation. So again, I think it's a win-win for her and in the town. So
Being unfamiliar with the internship process, is the stipend, is that customary or typical?
correct.
Okay. And it mentioned 4 to 6 months. Now, the semester, she's just going to be here, so it's more likely going to be 4 months than 6 unless she's going to stay on for a couple more. Right?
Correct. We wanted to leave a little bit of flexibility just to kind of see where we were at, and if she didn't have anything else, another job opportunity or things like that, and we still had some work, then we wanted that flexibility to be able to do that. We do have to be careful with the Obamacare restrictions on how many hours a person can work before we have to get into benefits, so we're watching all that very closely.
Well, it's semi-free labor, right?
Yeah.
The visitor's guide, you mentioned that there's no cost to the town, but I saw that there was a $4,500 cost over the next 6 months.
It is for distribution. We contract with a warehouse company that they get pallets of these visitors guides, and then when someone calls and requests one, they ship them out, as opposed to sticking, however many pallets in our storage room and then us incurring the shipping costs directly. It's a service, and I think it works well as with the Airport Alliance Marketing. They're the only ones who have a contract to go into the airports and put things on the shelf. So we almost need them for that. So it's kind of a sole source, if you will.
Yeah, what are our obligations in receiving the $5,000 Prop 202 funding from Fort McDowell? What is it that we're required to do? Maybe that's an Andrew or a Ken question.
It's a Ken question, probably.
It's actually an Andrew question. Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, we actually need to have Andrew review with their legal counsel on our current contract that we have for that 202 money. We actually have a contract with Fort McDowell today for this, but we use it as a professional services. We did to contract that out. So that still needs to be reviewed to find out if it can stay in place, then hopefully they can be our partners. We've had some initial meetings with them, which is, we've got a long way to go.
Sure.
With Fort McDowell.
Okay, more to come.
More to come.
All right. And then just a couple comments. My approach, I agree in part with some of the comments that have been made. I think what we need to do is do a few things really well and it's easy to get caught up, and I'm speaking from experience with my own office, and spending a lot of money on a bunch of different marketing things, and I think what we needed, the approach we should take is more of a rifle approach than a shotgun approach, and do a handful of things really well and market the town in that sense. And you know, I'd be interested to hear from staff as well as far as keeping this in-house as much as possible, maybe having an assistant to the economic development and having that working hand-in-hand economic development with somebody maybe on a part-time basis that can do a lot of the social media or at least coordinate and handle those things. Because I know it's a lot on your plate, Brian. I know you're working quite a bit as it is and now doing this as well. So I want to be mindful of that. Just food for thought for the council. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Just real quick, kind of along that line, I think maybe as you go along, you know, after the next 6 months or so, you know, to get a feel of what the needs might be, the possibility of contracting with somebody, I mean, much like the Chamber did with Francesca,
Sure.
that could help you out, and just, you know, keep that in mind for the future, too.
Yeah, Mayor Kavanaugh, Vice Mayor Hanson, this is just, you know, the very beginning. We may find out that it's a lot more work, and there's a lot of things that we can do better if we do contract. So this is just, like I said, the beginning. We'll see where we're at long-term as we get into next fiscal year, too.
And I just want to add, in relation to a couple of things that were said, our meeting with the fort today was really very, it shows that it's very beneficial to both of us. They've offered to link our site with their site and vice versa. President Balderas came himself with his general manager to assure us that he wants to continue and strengthen the partnership between the fort and Fountain Hills. And we did bring up the $5,000, and there was nothing said about that. We weren't going to be able to keep it. So I think working with them is going to be truly a great benefit to us, since they are the major destination in this area. So did
Mayor, if I may.
anyone have?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to dovetail into something you just said, and an observation I made when I was looking out at the website today, that we are marketing and promoting the fort and their amenities on our website currently. So I don't know if that kind of bleeds over to your question as well in terms of meeting the criteria for that 5,000. If you go out there, their presence is on that website, and they are being marketed through that website. Thank you, Mayor.
Right, well, I think there's also been some changes since we took over the website, adding more criteria for Fort McDowell, and we've done that with the Visitors Bureau, with the Visitors Guide.
Correct.
Those pages were sent to the fort for their people to look at, and Brian's been meeting with also the staff from the fort, and they have supplied additional information for the Visitors Guide, making it more personal for them, and with the information that they would like to see in there. And of course, the message from the new president is in there, which is a great thing to have. Councilman Yates, you've been
Thank
very
you.
patient. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. To take a slightly different direction, I'm a big proponent of privatization and utilizing the existing market. I know we are coming off this contract kind of thinking, okay, what did we do wrong? What can we do right? But I think a direction we might want to consider even at this time is to go back out to market. I know there's a local marketing company, True Perceptions, Scott Timms, who was part of the BVAC group, part of the Town Center group, did a branding exercise that was adopted, even had a subcontract with the Visitors Bureau that never went into play. And he's got some social media people ready to go as well. And I have nothing against bringing anything in-house if we have the capacity and the expertise. We may have the expertise, but I'm wondering if we have the capacity. And to all the legal points that Council Member Elke was bringing up, this would kind of give us some of the freedom by subbing this out as to some of the flexibility that we may need in some of the social media aspects. Where I'm basically going with this is, for us to compete with, you know, our sister cities and for that tourism dollar, we can't think like everyone else does. We need to think more like a private sector entity. And now that we have the numbers out, now that we know what the budget is, I would ask the indulgence of the council to let Scott Timms' group present. And I'm pretty sure they could be ready as soon as the first meeting in January to take a look at this, or even some sort of hybrid with some of the things that you have listed on your menu that you're looking to sub out or possibly, to be determined. These guys are experts. They're award-winning journalists, award-winning marketers. Scott Timms personally worked on the Mill Avenue in Tempe, some of that marketing. I just, I see us as, it's a great opportunity. I think it's a neat idea to talk about bringing some of these things inside, but if we need to compete at a different level, we got to think differently. We can't think like everybody else. And I think we have a real opportunity here. The guys that are on Scott's group, they're all local. Scott was the president of the soccer club. He's got several people who have children in our schools, soccer coaches, Little League coaches, et cetera. And this is what these guys do 24/7, as opposed to, and I have nothing against interns. I was an intern once as well. And there might still be an opportunity there for that person to work with this group. But I just think it's a neat opportunity. If we could just wait, 1 or 2 more weeks, let him present now that he knows what the numbers are, and then we can make a decision. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, thank you for the good information that you brought to the table this evening. I've also heard some really good comments. I like Tate's comment about doing more of a focused approach. I clearly hear what Cecil is bringing to the table, but I think we need to all take a deep breath. We've got 6 months to make some decisions and some changes, and opposed to trying to make any big decision quickly, I think could be a detriment to what we have working and standing right now. So I think we just all need to take a deep breath and think about what's going on and stay in tune with staff. And staff, I think we should, Mayor, I think we should try to get a report from staff on a fairly regular basis so we know what is actually happening and where we're taking this. And of course, as always, I feel like the most important part of what we're doing is the website, and that's the rifle approach that Cecil's talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, my biggest concern is that this is the business community's, this is their strong season. Usually the winter makes or breaks them for the summer. And so I don't want to not do any type of marketing. I think we still need to get involved with marketing, whether it's through the town or through an outside company. And I think we should immediately start that in January, because we have the Lantern Festival, we've got the fair, we've got the Kite Festival, we've got everything coming up, and I think those are going to suffer if we don't get the marketing out there.
Mayor Kavanaugh, absolutely. The plan is to jump on it right away after the first of the year. We just wanted a little bit of direction from you tonight. But again, we're going to keep things moving forward. We've kind of been going a little bit slowly, but again, if we, with a little help of the intern to do some of the legwork, we can give her direction and let her run with it. I think, again, I've had good success with folks coming right out of school as far as fresh ideas and probably some things that a lot of us don't even know. And I think that's a good start. I don't know, if it's the long-term solution, and again, we'll kind of evaluate those things, but I don't think we're going to be missing anything over the next couple months.
I'm sure that's true about her knowing things that we don't know.
Sure.
Okay.
So.
Anything else? Any other comments before we go on? Nothing? Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Discussion with possible direction to staff relating to Saguaro Boulevard construction schedule.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, as you know, that the staff promised that we would bring back to begin discussion about the project since the election with positive results to proceed with the reconstruction of Saguaro Boulevard. And as you know, as we related to you earlier, that the question is when. Right now, currently, we're out for our request for proposals for an engineering firm to begin design. But after design, what do we do then? It starts getting into latter months, and I'll let Paul talk more about that, and then we can open it up for further discussion. But it's going to come down to, do we stay the course and immediately start the construction project after design and call for bids, or do we demob, basically put it on ice of our so-called peak season, and then wait till our events are through and frankly, the spring and summer months come in and start it then. And Paul will talk a little bit more about those dates so we can get into depth, a little bit more discussion on that.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, members of the council, I'll just go briefly over the project again. I've probably done this 4 or 5 times in front of you guys, and then we'll get into sort of the scheduling. Again, the project is the full reconstruction of Saguaro Boulevard from probably just north of Shea all the way to Fountain Hills Boulevard. We have some drainage improvements around the golf course. We'll have some major drainage improvements at Palisades, and then again, the traffic signal replacement at Palisades as well. We will also be redoing the intersection at Avenue of the Fountains. We'll keep it a 3-way stop, but we're going to kind of tighten the intersection. And this project will also reconstruct the median on Avenue of the Fountains from that U-turn to the intersection. So we'll do some work there. There'll be a new fountain and things like that. Like Ken said, the bond was passed in early November. We immediately advertised the project the next week to get an engineering firm on board. Unfortunately, we're right in the peak of the holiday season, so we give them a little bit extra time. We had our mandatory pre-proposal meeting with engineering firms last week. Their statement of qualifications are going to be due in early January. Staff will review those and score them, and that's when we'll have our ranking about the 3rd week in January. If there is not a clear-cut #1 engineering firm, we'll have to go to interview process, oral interviews. So we'll invite at least the top 3 firms back in for interviews, and then we'll make a selection based on the interview process. If we go through the interview process, we're probably looking at early March before we get that engineer on board. That would set our design schedule up to start in early March. We're anticipating 6 months for design. The one wild card in there always is we have to send plans to all the utility companies for their review and comments. So you're talking, we have, separate water, sewer, electric, gas, cable companies. So you typically give them 30 days to review those plans as well. So sometimes they get right back to you, sometimes they take longer. If they have comments, you have to make those, address those, and send them back again. So we're anticipating 6 months, but again, with utility companies involved, it could push out a little bit longer than that. So if the 6 months holds true, we'll be bidding the project out in September, October. We'll get those bids back in, probably be coming to council with a construction contract sometime in November. So that now we get kind of meat and potatoes of the presentation. Typically, as the town manager said, you go from design to bidding the project to construction. That would put us starting construction late November, early December. We would obviously wait until after the first art fair or the Thanksgiving holiday with the parade and the turkey trot. But then you could be under construction December through May. And then on the right-hand side of this slide, I've worked with Brian and we listed out all the different events that are held in the downtown area. The ones in black are held mainly on the Avenue of the Fountains. The ones shown in red, those will use the portion of Saguaro in the downtown area, and the events in green are in the park. But while those are in the park, a lot of people cross over from the avenue to the park with the parking and different things. So if we go right through construction, we would have the Iron Girl, which we just had, which closes part of Saguaro. And then we talked with Brian, he could work with them to, move them around a little bit. The big conflict would be with the second art fair in February. That would, obviously, we don't know if the contractor would be in that area, but we assume they would. The contractor will probably want to start with all the underground stuff first. That would be the traffic signal at Palisades. There's a lot of drainage work there, and they might want to start working on the avenue median as well. So So those are, and then we'd have the mountain to fountain relay in there as well. So those are the major events on Saguaro. If we waited until March to start the project, you would impact a lot less events. The pros and cons to both of those scenarios are if you do the construction more quickly, your project is completed faster. The cons are it impacts more special events, and that's our high winter visitor season. And the pros and cons to delaying it, the pros are you'd have fewer special events impacted, would not impact our kind of busy season with the winter visitors. But the cons are then you would be impacting businesses during their slow season, which is, might be even more of a struggle for them. You might get some increased engineering fees because you're starting and stopping. You would have an unknown fluctuation in the bond market. We'd have a 3 or 4 month delay there. You'd have unknown fluctuation in fuel and construction material pricing. Contractors are getting more busy, so you might see a little bit of escalation in bids because of that. And then utility coordination, we would have a kind of a lag period, and you could have an SRP go in there and do something, or Southwest Gas. Then we're back into doing utility reviews again. So those are some of the pros and cons. And then for potential construction sequencing, we don't like to dictate when and where and how a contractor is going to work. We're going to put in our specifications that they're going to have to maintain traffic on Saguaro. They're going to need to keep access to businesses and residences. There could be a few small closures required. The way they, staff internally looked at it, and there's really 2 ways we're thinking they'll do it. One is you could close just one half of Saguaro and then flip dual traffic to the other side. That would let the contractor just go in one direction and work a lot faster. There are a few areas where it provides some access problems, so they might have to cut the median and provide some crossovers. The other way to do it would be to close one lane at a time and go. There's a little bit of challenges there when you start doing the drainage. That would work. We've had the northbound one lane on Saguaro closed here for about a month with that fuel spill cleanup, and it really didn't impact traffic too much. So that's another way the contractors could do it. But again, we don't want to dictate how, when, and where that contractor has to work. We like to leave it up to them, because once we start dictating and something goes wrong, then we own it, and that they're going to come back with change orders and things like that. That is basically the presentation, and we wanted to get some direction from council. Right now the plan is to just go with the project. That's typical project delivery. But if council decides to have us delay it, we want to make you aware of the pros and cons of doing that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Is there any projection from our finance department as far as the interest rates going up in the bonds?
I don't have any. It's, always fluctuating.
Mayor, Calvin, members of the council, it's going to be very difficult to try to project. I mean, they're talking about interest rates now going up. We have no idea, especially with commodity increases. When you start talking about the cost of concrete, cost of asphalt, to project that out for another year is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, but it seems like it's on the rise, just from what's going on right now. So you're saying, though, it's possible to shut down half the road and still have half the road to use, or?
Mayor Kavanaugh, council members, that's one way the contractor could do it. We don't really dictate that.
Oh, we don't? Okay.
No. We could, but if something happens, then we own it if something doesn't work out right.
Okay. Anybody want to, Councilman Dickey?
A couple questions. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, when is the median project again? I know I've asked you times.
Currently working with the design firm, the architect on the median. They have their revised plans into me. We gave them comments. We're hoping to bid that out sometime in January, so we can start construction about April 1st, and that would finish up about the end of October. And another thing I need to mention too is we're also working with the engineer on the Shea project, and we're planning on bidding that out in the spring, hoping to get done by the end of 2014 as well.
Well, Mayor, so basically, the median will be done no matter which alternative we take.
Correct.
The one thing I just want to point out on the next to last slide about the pros and cons, if you look at the cons to waiting, those are pros to doing it now, and they're kind of compelling pros there. Also, just real quickly, last year when it rained, we had to spend $100,000 in a kind of an emergency thing, so I don't know how much we'd want to have to do something like that if we ended up with that happening again by waiting. And I also think, I understand what you were saying about not putting constraints on them, but I'm sure they can stage around certain things, like the fair, to make sure that we have access. But again, Saguaro Boulevard isn't the only way to get to the fair. And then the last thing I just wanted to ask about was the monsoons themselves. If we waited and did the second alternative, then there's a chance that a lot of that construction could be being done during the monsoon, and I don't know if that affects the work or not. So I think I'm looking at thinking we should do it right away.
I see that Bev is waving a speaker card.
Jean Slutka.
Okay.
I thought I wasn't going to get a chance. My name is Gene Slukta, and first of all, I want to wish all of you a wonderful holiday season, and when you're out and about, please be safe. I wholeheartedly support the staff's recommendation, and I'm hearing a little bit of that here, I hope, to begin the Saguaro project in the late November, early December timeframe. You know, the largest events impacted, as always, are the two fairs. But I think the staff has selected the best alternative by waiting to begin after the November fair. So I think that's a really good compromise to address both business concerns and real risks from the delays. Staff has identified several real risks. Higher engineering fees for starting and stopping. I mean, how much could that cost the residents of the town? The unknown fluctuations in the bond market, which you all touched upon, construction material prices. Again, how much could that cost the residents of the town? Delay could impact contractor availability and bid pricing and impact the coordination, as we've heard. And again, what's the potential cost there? You know, I guess we don't know, but you know, it could easily be six figures. The residents of this town wisely approved the $8 million bond, but they also want to get moving, as do I, on this crucial project, and want to minimize the risk of large cost overruns, potentially, for what may be minimal impact on the businesses. What are the inconveniences during the construction? Well, staff can articulate that much better, and I think he has. But I suppose that the major convenience for residents is the reduction of Saguaro Boulevard to one lane in each direction. Kind of like parts of Fountain Hills Boulevard is today, all the time. By the way, the inconveniences impact full-time town residents whenever the project happens. So I believe they voted yes to those inconveniences in order to do the right thing and reconstruct Saguaro. As you know, town staff has captured over time the counts of cars entering Fountain Hills during the fair weeks. They total about 15,000 additional cars. I'm not a traffic expert, but I don't believe that would result in really crushing traffic jams by reducing lanes on Saguaro. For one thing, it is spread over 3 days, not like what happens at the end of a football game at Sun Devil Stadium, for example. Secondly, many of those cars enter town by other streets, such as Palisades and Fountain Hills Boulevard. And Saguaro Boulevard will not be shut down. So as staff and town manager Ken Buchanan said, let's move forward seamlessly without any delays between design, bidding, and construction timetables. So I hope that we do move forward quickly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jean. And for the record, Jean is from Fountain Hills. Comments on this side? Vice Mayor?
I agree that we should move forward more quickly, and like Brian had said, working with some of the events going on, things can be rerouted, find other locations. For the February fair, instead of having booths down Saguaro, maybe use Verde River and Paul Norden Parkway. There's just other things that could be worked out. So I think it just seems a lot better to move forward quickly.
Okay, Councilman Elke.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that there's going to be any good time to do this. Certainly, we're going to have issues, whether, and that it's an interesting point that you point out in the summer. If we did it in the summer, then that would even more negatively impact. So there's going to be impact no matter what, and obviously being as sensitive to the business and the residents as we can. But the end product is going to be wonderful, having a newly paved Saguaro Boulevard. So I think going forward with it, as recommended by staff, is the best course.
Councilman Yates?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to echo, get it done now. Quantitative easing just backed off. Interest rates are going to go up. And to Mr. Schlechte's point, 1 point could easily be 6 figures on this, but with a strong emphasis on keep the roads open, especially for our merchants. So get her done.
Okay. Councilman Leger?
I was just going to ask you,
Comment?
Mayor, if we're looking for a motion.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and it sounds like, well, it sounds like Ginny was going in that direction, or Cassie,
but
so flip a
Vice
coin.
Mayor's just.
I just
told
had
us.
one thing before the
Go right ahead.
There was one other positive,
Yeah.
that it will be an experiment to have Saguaro in the downtown area narrowed down temporarily to see how nice, it'll be easier for, yeah, see, there.
To see how nice what?
To see how much easier it is for pedestrians to get around, because traffic will be going slower.
And to have the fair on
Social
Verde
experiment.
River.
Okay, Councilman Brown, you have a.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, we've been pregnant long enough. I think it's time to have the baby. You know, seriously, it's time to move this project forward. It's been
Okay, that
a
just
long
about-
time coming.
That sums it up. Would you like to make the motion with that
Sure.
comment?
Yeah, certainly. I would like to make a motion that we take staff's recommendation and move this project forward at a constant and steady pace.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
Okay. All right, presentation and discussion of the land use assumptions and infrastructure improvement plan related to the town's development impact fee study. Ken? And Andrew?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, as you know, that Arizona Revised Statute 9-463-05 that governs development impact fees was changed back in 2011. And it also gives us some deadlines to meet in conforming our current development impact fee ordinance with the new laws. Mr. Giordina is here tonight. I'll say that 10 times. To discuss, is our consultant, to discuss from Raftalis Financial, who's been working on this process for us to update our impact fees to conform to the new statutes. So I'll turn it over to Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan, Mayor Kavanaugh, and council. It's nice to appear before you again. I've had the pleasure of working with the town going back quite a long time. I won't give you the exact number of years, but it's been quite a long time. So as Mr. Buchanan said, this evening we'd like to brief you on where we are in this process that the legislation has laid out before us. My associate, Andrew Ream, has been the project manager on this effort. He has been working very closely with Ken and Andrew and Julie and other town staff, given the complexity of this kind of a study in and of itself, but then layering on it the legislative requirements and the deadlines that we have. What I'd like to do this evening is to brief you on the process that we have been following, the deliverables, if you will, at this stage, the land use assumptions, the infrastructure improvements plan, talk about where we go from here under this legislative calendar, and then respond to any questions and concerns that you might have. So I'm going to move fairly quickly, and I'm going to be brief this evening so we can get to your questions. The process that we've been following has really three components. First is the land use assumptions, which really define the service or the demand for service in Fountain Hills. We use the demand for service to then identify the facilities that are needed to respond to meet that service demand, and that's the infrastructure improvements plan. And the way in which we respond to that demand for service is twofold, and I'll talk about that when we get to a couple fee areas, but it's really identifying the facilities that we have in place today and the facilities that we plan for the future to meet that demand. And then using development impact fees, at least in part, to fund those facilities. So it's the IIP and the land use assumptions that we have filed and put out for public review. Later in the presentation, I'll talk about the calendar, but the next step is the impact fee report. That's where we actually take A divided by B and we get to the fees. So that is forthcoming. And part of that process is also looking at how we're going to finance these improvements, not just with development impact fees, but with bond issues and borrowings, but other revenues that the town might have available. So that is down the road and coming to you at a later date. The purpose of this evening is really just these first two items in the process, the land use assumptions and the infrastructure improvement plan. Quick review of the current fees that we have in place. Those include the four that are listed here, and then we have a fifth that I'll show you on the next slide. There are some of these that are going away for a variety of reasons. The primary reason is we don't have projects in the future that are really eligible for these fees. And those two fees shown on this page that are going away are law enforcement and the library and museum fee. I'm going to be talking in a few minutes about the two fees that will continue, Parks and Recreation and Fire and Emergency, EMS. And we'll talk about, again, the units of service, the demand for service that we have, the capital infrastructure that we're going to use to meet the demand for Parks and Recreation and Fire and Emergency services. The fifth fee that we have in place today is the street fee, our most significant fee. And because of a lack of capital improvements, street capital improvements, this fee is essentially going away. For this fee, as well as law enforcement, library, and museum, and our open space fee that we sunsetted back in the beginning of 2011, the funds that we've generated to date will in fact get used. They'll be used for a variety of what I'm going to say smaller projects relative to these fee areas that have existed. But looking forward, we really don't have a basis for continuing to assess fees in these areas. So I want to shift the discussion to then the first step in the process, the land use assumptions. And as I say, this is the process of identifying the demand for services. And that demand is really driven by our population, and population converted into dwelling units or housing units is shown here. So over the 10-year study period that's identified in the legislation that we can look to, we're identifying growth as shown here, about 16%, 17% in our population, and translating that into dwelling units about 13%. We then go and look at non-residential and look at things like employment and square feet of development of these type of commercial and industrial properties, and largely relying on information that is used in other town planning activities and looking to the Maricopa Association of Governments. We're not creating these numbers out of thin air. They're values and they're projections that the town is already relying upon for a variety of purposes. And so we're using these now for non-residential to project the equivalent number of units that will be developed for non-residential. We then marry that up with the residential development to really then look at what's the total demand for service in the town of Fountain Hills. And we use what we call an EDU, an equivalent dwelling unit or an equivalent development unit, as the basis of this. And our equivalent unit is the residential. And that's shown here as the EDU value of 2.16. This tells us we have 2.16 people per 1,000 square feet of developed residential property. And we then look at and compare that to retail, to industrial and so forth, and then putting all of these different types of development on a common unit basis then allows us to look forward at the total number of equivalent dwelling units we're projecting for the town of Fountain Hills, and then translating that into demand for service for the two fee areas that we're moving forward with. And those are embodied then in the infrastructure improvement plan, which tells us the capital facilities we need to meet those demands that we've projected in the land use assumptions. And I should take one step back in time. Perhaps not everyone in the room today, or the folks that will see this, recognize what a development impact fee is, and that's where I should have started. A development impact fee is a one-time fee paid typically at the time a building permit is pulled. And it's intended to represent the unit cost of capital that, in this case, the town of Fountain Hills has invested in order to provide that service. And the services we're going to be looking at are the fire and EMS and parks and recreation. So it's that one-time fee. It's paid by new development. It could also be paid in a redevelopment scenario where the redevelopment results in an increased demand for that service. So this is not any sort of a monthly fee. This is a one-time fee paid typically when a building permit is pulled. So now let me fast forward to the IIP. We know the demand for services as a result of the land use assumptions. We now need to look at how that translates into how we're going to meet that demand, and whether we're meeting that through existing facilities, existing parks that we have in place, our existing 2 fire stations, or what future facilities do we have to undertake, do we have to construct in order to meet those facilities. And so these then become the basis of coming up with the unit cost, the ultimate fee. And we look at and we forecast revenues, as shown here in the last bullet, from both our development impact fees and from other sources that the town might have. And we really need to take a comprehensive look under the legislation, under the statutes, at all fee sources so that we can ensure that if we're undertaking a project, we've identified the complete set of funding sources necessary to undertake that we're not just relying on development impact fees, or if we are, we've identified that. But if we have some shortfalls, because perhaps some of these projects are related to increasing capacity for existing residents, that we have the full picture with regard to how we're going to fund these projects. So let me start with fire and EMS. And what we're showing here is fire station number 1, your existing facility. We're also showing fire station number 2, an existing facility. The town has plans to move fire station number 2, so we've showed 2 alternative locations. And then you can see in the center and up a little to the left, fire station number 3. So when we look at the infrastructure that's going to be needed to serve the demand for services, we in Fountain Hills need 3 fire stations. And these fire stations, given the way we provide service, can meet the demands of the entire service area, the entire town limits. So we're not identifying individual or sub-service areas. For some communities, that in fact is done, and under Arizona legislation, we have to ask that question. What is the service area? And so as you see here for fire, and we'll also talk about with regard to parks, the entire town limits represent the service area. We don't have sub-service areas and different fees potentially in those areas. We can serve all of the town through these 3 stations, and we in fact do. So we look at the current facilities, stations 1 and 2, and the current value of those represent about $1.6 million. Our new fire station is shown here, $2.8 million. And between these 3 stations, we will be able to serve the demands in Fountain Hills through 2035. And so we look at all of the units that can be served, and that really becomes our denominator in the equation. And we divide that into the total dollars to ultimately get a fee that we'll be bringing back for your consideration in a few months. Parks and Recreation. Here we're showing the existing parks, both neighborhood and what we might call community, and future parks as well. And in the upper right-hand corner, you see a future park that's part of a development agreement, and that park will be paid for as a part of that agreement. So it really doesn't enter into our calculation of the fee, but we need to identify all facilities. We have the Four Peaks Park, we have the Desert Vista Small Neighborhood Park, we have, of course, the Fountain Park, Golden Eagle Park. We have a future park, as you see in the center of the town limits, a little off to the left, and then a planned future park. So these are the facilities that then really make up the basis of the fee. We look at what you have today and the capacity of those parks to be able to serve not only existing development units, but also the future development units that were identified in the land use assumptions. Again, a town-wide service area, residents in Fountain Hills can use any and all of the parks. Our current facilities and the land represented by them have a value of $21.3 million, and we don't escalate the land cost to a replacement value, but we do the current facilities. We have the new park identified, 3.4 acres and about $700,000. And again, like the fire service, these facilities, existing in the plan, will serve our development well beyond our 10-year planning horizon. So the IIP is the document that identifies for fire and parks the facilities that we have in place, the capacity we have in place, and the capacity we will be constructing for future development. The legislation, as Ken mentioned, passed in 2011, is very prescriptive, very regimented, and we must complete this process in order to have these fees in place August 1. To the extent we don't complete the process, the fees are essentially null and void. Okay? The fees I mentioned that are going to go away in terms of law enforcement, library and museum, and streets, those remain in place, can remain in place until effectively August 1st of 2014, and we can continue to take revenues in and use them for other eligible projects. But effective on August 1st of 2014, those fees will go away. So we have a public hearing scheduled on the land use assumptions and infrastructure improvement plan report that has been published and put out there for the public. It's in preliminary fashion because we want that input. Once we get that input, we can finalize that report and then move forward with the calculation of the fees. So we'll have a scheduled meeting on March 10th to adopt the land use assumptions and the infrastructure improvement plan. We will, at that same date, bring draft fees back for council consideration. So you'll see the dollars, the amount per equivalent dwelling unit that's being proposed for the two fee areas. We have a public hearing on April 9th for the calculated fees, and council consideration of the impact fees on May 15th, all geared towards the August 1, 2014 implementation date. So I know I've moved quickly, Mayor Kavanaugh, but any questions or comments? And again, we're not looking, Mayor, for action this evening. This is merely a briefing for the council and the public.
Okay, thank you. Let me open up to questions from the council. Questions?
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Leger?
Yes, thank you. It's not a question, it's just really a compliment. Thank you for the presentation. You've taken a relatively complex subject and simplified it, made it perfectly clear. And your presentation was very clear. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilwoman Dickey or Councilman Brown?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So along with the changes in the law, is there also a change of the length of time we can actually hold the money before it's utilized?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Brown, under the legislation, the intent is that fees must be spent within 10 years of collection. Absent that, you can be subject to refunds and all the complications that come with that, but that's a part of the legislation. Yes, sir.
And what do you see in general? Will the fees be coming down because we've lost the ability to fund law enforcement, parks, or et cetera?
I think it's safe to say that with the elimination of those 3 fee areas, and the single most significant one was the street fee, in total, development impact fees in Fountain Hills will be coming down.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Dickey?
Thank you, Mayor. So this reminds me why we were complaining about this 2 years ago when this came through. And anything I say about money that we're spending on this is not a reflection on you, but basically we had to go through this study, this expenditure to get to this phase, and then obviously the things we have to do in the future. I was reading an article in the Arizona Republic from October of 2011 that will just remind us on how we got here. And again, we really appreciate what you're doing to help our town to meet these requirements. But the Home Builders Association, this is from the Republic, has long chafed against what it considers abuses of impact fees charged by cities to pay for the cost of growth. Even after extensive negotiations with city leaders, and you know about that, Andrew, the law ended up including a list where the fees can and cannot be used, as you said, getting so specific as to limit them to libraries of less than 10,000 square feet or parks of fewer than 30 acres. Swimming pools are okay, but not aquatic centers. The law puts time limits on the use of the fees, requires every city to review its current fees, a process so legally complicated it has some cities turning to consultants. Cities also must establish review commissions that include developers. Most city leaders, I'm skipping, but this is in the article, see that this law is an expensive intrusion in local affairs. Communities from Gilbert to Glendale are paying up to $150,000 for consultants to navigate the complexities of the bill and tell them which of their current impact fees must go. The news is often bad. And basically, even before we got to this point, we had years of freezing the impact fees or not allowing us to collect the impact fees at all. So, and I think, Andrew, you may have even said this at the time, that perhaps the desire of this law was to get us all to just forget about it and just give up and surrender collecting them at all. The failure to realize that without this, the burden goes on existing residents, as it does on a lot of things in the town of Fountain Hills. So I'm sorry that we had to go through this. I'm sorry we're getting where we're going to get. But I am glad that we did go through the exercise and that we are on target to be done by August 2014, complying with the law and continue to collect development fees on certain things that will help us provide infrastructure for our citizens, not just future, but existing. And I just have one specific question about the funds that are left over that we can't use. Councilman Elke, we had the idea of using the ones that we weren't able to use before from open space, I think. There was something that we didn't have a project large enough for. And we used it to pay off the building, the debt on this building. So I was wondering if that was something that we would end up being able to do with the police one or the open space one or the library one.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Dickey, that is in fact the case. There is under the legislation what I would call these opportunities to use the accumulated fund balance from fees that have been in place that will no longer be in place. There's the opportunity to use them for what we'll call necessary public services or eligible projects. So you have funds in law enforcement, and the intent is to use those for space that will be part of the remodeled Fire Station number 2, where law enforcement needs that space. The library and museum fund balance is very small, will be used in part to pay some of the remaining debt in the upcoming fiscal year. Streets has a relatively small balance as well, and that will be part of the project, if I understood it correctly, that you were just discussing on Saguaro and the Shea improvements. And lastly, open space has a very significant balance that will be part of the Adero Canyon trailhead improvements. So we do have those opportunities.
And Mayor, thank you. The deadline for the Adero Canyon trailhead is what? The 10 years?
2020.
We're showing that in fiscal year 2020, yes.
Okay. With these figures that we're looking at, typical home, somebody wants to build a residential home, you know, let's say 250,000. Can you give us some idea, like what it cost with the original impact fee would have been on that and what it would be now? Or whatever figure you have for a median home, or just to give us an idea of what someone who moves here, buys a lot, wants to build a house. Can you do that?
Mayor
No.
Kavanaugh, I
Okay.
can speak to the current fees, but we haven't moved far enough along, merely because we're waiting for comments on the land use assumptions in the infrastructure improvement plan. Your current fees for a typical residence, the largest of the fees are the current street fee of about $5,600. Layer on top of that another $2,100 for Parks and Rec. And you're approaching $8,000 for a single-family residence across the 5 fee areas that you have in place today. And 3 of those fee areas and the single largest fee area, streets, is going away. So as I said earlier, the fees will come down by virtue of the fact that we only have 2 fees versus the 5 we previously had. But I don't have an idea of what those.
That's okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was just thinking that, you know, on the positive side of this is that it might spur some more development because it'd be a little bit cheaper to build a house.
And Mayor Kavanaugh, in terms of that spurring, I suspect we're going to see very little development until August 1st of 2014.
Well, we're already seeing some development here in Fountain Hills,
Yes.
so we're happy with that. And some more on the horizon looks like it might be coming in, so. Does anyone else have any other questions? Councilman?
Just a comment. Thank you very much for coming out, and thank you for the presentation. The discussion about the street fees going away and the previous agenda item has prompted me, I think we need to have some item later on a future agenda. We're talking about the replacement of what we're doing as far as Saguaro Boulevard is concerned and a lot of the other work that's doing on Shea and that sort of thing. What we're not addressing yet is how we're going to maintain it. And we still have a shortfall as far as maintaining the roads that we have, especially if these fees are going to be, the development fees are going to be reduced or go away altogether. I think we need to have an agenda item in the future to know how we're going to maintain Saguaro once it is replaced. Because we're talking about doing this, replacement and everything, but the thing that we're not addressing, the smaller elephant in the room, is how we're going to maintain it now. Because I think we have a shortfall. Ken, I don't know if you know off the top of your head what that cost would be annually, but I think that is something that we need to have a discussion in the future. There's no sense putting the new road down if we can't maintain it. Right.
Would that be under impact fees maintenance, or is that just for a new road construction?
Mayor Kavanaugh and Councilmember Elke, that is one of the definitions of a development impact fee, that it could only be used for capital.
Right.
So it is not a funding source for the maintenance that you're referring to.
Okay, well, then, I guess that idea spurred the other. I still think we should have a future agenda item based on that previous one, so. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, if not, thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you for
Mayor.
coming in today. Okay, and we don't need any action on that, so we'll go on to discussion with possible direction to staff regarding Chaparral City Water Company's water rate increase proposal. Ken?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, I'm sorry for the lateness in this agenda item, but we received this late yesterday afternoon, and with a deadline for filing. As you know, we are an intervener with the Arizona Corporation Commission for the proposed rate increase by Chaparral City Water Company, with their request for a 34.84% rate increase in their water services. We received the staff report, the Arizona Corporation Commission staff report, which recommends 11.46% rate increase. We felt that, and this has to be filed by Tuesday, the 24th, so we needed to get it on the agenda for you. And I'm sorry for the lateness and the documents being about 6 inches thick, and and what the three reports that were given. The bottom line is that in order to get something filed, we're asking that the council consider supporting the the Arizona Corporation Commission staff's recommendation for a rate increase of 11.46% for Chaparral Water, so that we could file something by the deadline.
Okay, any discussion, questions? No? Yes, Councilwoman
That's,
Dickey?
I have a, thank you, Mayor, a basic question. Why are we doing one or the other? I mean, do we have to approve something, or it'll be a bigger amount, or is that something that we, I know we're an intervener, but what if we just don't want to do anything?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of council, that is certainly one alternative. You don't have to do anything and not have an opportunity to comment as an intervener for this. I'm just saying is that if we don't, forever hold our peace. We won't have another. You can go into the public process and as a public citizen and talk about it, but as an intervener, you're going to need to file something on our position.
Mayor, I guess I feel like I don't know enough about this. Like, I know you gave us all the transcripts of everything, but, I didn't read it all because it was, like you said, we just got it, and it seemed like it was, just a back and forth of who said what, but I don't understand what the conclusion is. I mean, did anybody ask for it to be less? Is this something that we spoke about in the past that we thought was a reasonable amount that I'm just forgetting about? I guess I'm trying to figure out how we can make a decision like this based on what we know, or at least based on what I know.
You have three perspectives of their rate. I think it was the engineer, and Andrew helped me out on this, is the engineer, you had the analyst, and then you had a consultant. And they're the ones that pretty much recommended that in-house, the corporation, that this be the 11%. And we think that with that numbers, without having our own analysis of those, we thought that would be a fair analysis, because even RUCO came back with an 18% recommendation.
Andrew?
That's what I was going to add, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dickey. The Corporation Commission staff recommendation is the lowest of all of the recommendations. RUCO's testimony was submitted today that we have, and they're at 18%, and Chaparral's at 34.8%. So the request was to weigh in with the lowest one that's been filed so far with any expert testimony without having to generate your own testimony and provide rate testimony and experts on the town's dime.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just trying to figure out how this is going to, we didn't talk to anybody about this in town, and so, but I know it wasn't anybody's fault that it was kind of rushed.
All right, Councilman Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Ken, how often can they go back in for a rate increase? How long will this stand?
That's a good question. I don't exactly know if there's moratoriums, if they have a moratorium. I think they could possibly go back in and ask for an adjustment or amendments. Have you heard anything new on that? I've not seen it. Let me put it that way. In the municipalities that I've been in that have had private water companies, I've not seen them come back in any timely manner and asking for any further rate increases. Let me put it that way.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Brown, there is a time frame. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm happy to get it for you. The water rate expert in our firm who's been tracking all this can probably tell us in a heartbeat, although I doubt he'll answer his email right now.
Call him up. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? Vice Mayor?
Just a quick question. So we take the lesser of the evils and say, so we support this amount. But then as an intervener, if you want to go in, can you actually go in and say, well, we really support 10%? Or are you locked into that number? And I think maybe that's part of what Jenny was saying, too, that, are we committing to something and we can still maybe say, we want to tweak it down even more?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, very good point. The point is that you have to have justification for that. You have to have your own analysis.
We have to have our own 3 inches of documentation.
Yes, well, 6 inches in this case, but, there's 3 documents that went with it on 3 different perspectives.
Councilman Elke?
Thank you. Andrew, if we were to intervene on this, would we just be attaching the documents that they already have in support of the 18%? So we're just saying, do what these people are saying, or what this group is saying?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Elke, it's a lot like in a typical court proceeding where you would weigh in as joining on their brief, essentially, is what we're doing. We would be joining their position.
Right, and what's the time constraints and I guess the ultimate legal cost in order to do something like that?
Pretty minimal, and that was our goal, was to find the best horse to ride on this one at the cheapest cost, and this turned out to be it.
What's the impact going to be on something like that if the town weighs in?
I think that it's important for the Corporation Commission to hear from the most impacted entities, and the town's a big user, so it is a user that will have an impact from 10% versus 38% or 11% or 18 or whatever is granted. So it's important to them, and I've heard commissioners say that they want to know what the local folks are saying. So I think it's kind of the least cost way to have your toe in the door, so that if we have to present anything later on, or to appear, or to have any of you appear, that we're in the door and we're able to do so.
Yeah, I would be in favor of intervening on it for the lowest percent.
Well, I guess we'd be.
motion?
Is that a motion?
That was just. Make a motion that the town intervene at, well, I'm sorry, Andrew, is there an actual motion on here?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Move to approve.
It's moved to approve the recommendation. I would say the motion, probably more refined, should be a motion to authorize the town staff, town attorney to move forward and join in the Corporation Commission's staff position.
That sounds good. Make that motion.
Second, Vice Mayor. And any other discussion?
If we could somewhere in there have the 11.46%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
Anything else, Ken?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of council, I want to say a very Merry Christmas to all of you. Have happy holidays.
That's a good summary.
Merry
Can I
Christmas.
have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second? And all in favor?
Aye.
All right, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Dennis, your message is already sent.
Yes, you may not be different.
Hey, how's it going?